came to me in a flash of inspiration, and frankly, carrying it alone was the only way to protect its fragile, singular vision. The stage lights were a violent, synthetic blue, catching the condensation on the water glass in front of him. Xavier's smile was a masterpiece of practiced humility, but it never quite reached his eyes. From my seat in the third row of the packed auditorium at the Future Forward conference, I slowly raised my complimentary flute of warm Prosecco. Singular visions, I thought. We met at a Greasy Spoon diner in the dead of night, both refugees from a coding meetup that had devolved into an argument over programming languages. He was all frantic energy and grand pronouncements, sketching the architecture of a new kind of interactive art on a paper napkin. I was the quiet one, the one who saw the structural flaws in his beautiful drawing and knew, instinctively, how to fix them. He was the lightning, I was the bottle. First good memory was the all-nighter we pulled to finish the initial prototype for what we called Project Labyrinth. We coded until the sun rose, the screen glow casting long shadows in my small apartment. The final line of code compiled without an error at 5:17 a.m. We didn't cheer. We just shared a look of profound, exhausted relief. That shared silence felt more intimate than any celebration. The first red flag came a month later. It was pitching an early-stage investor and used the word "I" 6 times in under a minute. When I brought it up gently over coffee, he threw his head back and laughed, a loud, theatrical sound. You know what I mean, T, we're a team. It's just shorthand. I chose to believe him. It was easier that way. The next 18 months were a blur of creation. We worked out of my apartment, which I'd reconfigured into a small studio. My walls were covered in our flowcharts. My credit card paid for the server space and the expensive software licenses. Won a small grant of $12,000, which we celebrated with cheap champagne on my building's roof, the city lights sprawling below us. He talked about our future, our studio, our legacy. He was always the one talking. I was the one doing the work. Slowly, the balance shifted. I was handling the UX design, the back-end architecture, the thousands of lines of code that were the project's skeleton and soul. He was handling the vision and the networking. His networking looked a lot like long lunches at expensive restaurants I wasn't invited to. His vision often involved him returning from one of these lunches and describing, with great excitement, a new feature that I had, in fact, proposed and coded the week before. It's just boring money stuff. Taylor, you'd hate it, he'd say, waving away my questions about meetings. The discovery was accidental, a moment of digital carelessness. He bought a new laptop and asked me to sync his cloud drive. As the files transferred, I saw a folder I didn't recognize, Labyrinth Solo Pitch. It was dated 6 months prior. My heart went cold. I clicked. Inside was our entire project, meticulously rebranded as the work of a lone genius. My name was nowhere. Worse, he'd stolen my biography, my childhood fascination with old maps, my thesis on procedural generation, and woven it into his own narrative. He hadn't just erased me, he had cannibalized me. That night, my quiet unease hardened into cold purpose. For 11 weeks, I became an archivist of my own life. Using a sync monitoring app, I created a time-stamped, legally admissible backup of every file, every commit, every revision. I forwarded 57 key emails to a private, encrypted address, emails where he'd ask me to just quickly whip up a core feature or fix the UI you designed. I contacted 2 freelance illustrators he'd hired for his own personal projects using our grant money. They were more than happy to provide sworn affidavits and invoices. I was building a case, brick by silent brick. Breaking point arrived at the Future Forward conference. He was on the main stage, the keynote speaker, bathed in that sterile blue light. The panel moderator, a sharp journalist named Zara, asked him about the collaborative spirit in modern tech. That's when he delivered his line about the fragile, singular vision. Afterward, at the crowded networking reception, I found him holding court. He saw me approaching, and his face arranged itself into an expression of deep pity. Look, Taylor, I know this is hard to hear, he said, his voice low and confidential. But your contribution was foundational. You built the garage. I designed and built the supercar inside it. Some people are meant to be support staff. That's not a bad thing. The clinking glasses and industry chatter around us faded to a dull hum. Everything went still. All I could focus on was a tiny, almost invisible scratch on the crystal of his expensive watch. A watch I'd bought him to celebrate our first major milestone a year ago. That scratch became my anchor. In that frozen moment, the plan, which had been a formless collection of facts and feelings, snapped into crystalline focus. The first person I called was Ms. Vance, an intellectual property lawyer whose reputation was one of quiet, brutal efficiency. Her initial consultation fee was more than my rent, but her advice was priceless. Let him build his own cage, she said, her voice a calm, precise instrument over the phone. We don't move until he's locked the door himself. The legal preparations cost me over $22,000, a sum I secured with a loan against my car. Every night, I would review documents with Ms. Vance, copyright filings, declarations of ownership, a meticulous accounting of the stolen grant funds. One night, I almost got caught. Xavier called, his voice dripping with false camaraderie. Hey, I was just cleaning up some old files, noticed you still had admin access to the main repository. Mind if I streamline that? My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a steadying breath. No problem, I'll remove myself. I did, but only after Ms. Vance had confirmed we had triple redundant, cryptographically signed copies of the entire server. Our evidence portfolio was undeniable. It contained the emails, timestamped screen recordings of me writing and compiling the core code, transaction receipts for server hosting from my personal bank account, and the freelancer affidavits. Ironic masterstroke was a piece of evidence I had almost forgotten, the original napkin from the diner where we met. On it, in my hurried handwriting, were the foundational architectural notes for Project Labyrinth. His only contribution, scrawled in the corner, was a smiley face and the word, genius. Even more perfect, a well-known tech blogger he'd recently snubbed at an event was digging for a story on creative partnership disputes. Ms. Vance knew her well. The final piece was in place. I was in the process of securing a $150,000 seed round from a venture capital firm, Viridian Capital. The deal was contingent on his absolute, sole ownership of all intellectual property. He was about to sign a contract that would make him personally liable for any and all fraud. The Cage was a sleek, minimalist art gallery in the city's most pretentious district. The event was the launch of his solo exhibit, Labyrinth, the architecture of a dream. It was a monument to his ego, filled with large prints of my UI designs and interactive screens running my code. The gallery was packed with investors, critics, and the partners from Viridian Capital. I found him by a large monitor displaying the project's elegant login screen. He was glowing, soaking in the adoration. I walked up to him, my hands steady. It's an impressive body of work you've curated here, Xavier. He gave me a condescending smirk. Thanks, Taylor. Glad you could see what it grew into. I'm just confused about the attributions, I said calmly. On my signal, Ms. Vance, looking formidable in a dark gray suit, approached and handed a thick leather-bound portfolio to Xavier's stunned-looking lawyer. It contained our cease and desist letter, the sealed copyright infringement filing, and the top layer of our evidence. Xavier's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion that quickly curdled into anger. This is ridiculous, he hissed, a desperate shakedown from a disgruntled assistant. Ms. Vance didn't even look at him. She addressed his lawyer. Perhaps your client should turn to Exhibit D, page 14. It's a screenshot of a folder on his personal cloud drive, titled Labyrinth Solo Pitch. The color drained from Xavier's face. He looked at me, his eyes wide with the dawning horror of a man realizing the trapdoor has already sprung beneath him. You can't prove any of this was yours, he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't raise my voice. I just tapped my temple lightly. I don't have to. Code has my digital signature embedded in every single module. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The Viridian Capital deal dissolved before the canapes were cleared. The tech blogger's story, titled The Ghost in the Labyrinth, went viral by morning. My phone vibrated nonstop with messages from mutual friends, but I had already turned it off. The legal fight was over before it began. Faced with irrefutable proof, Xavier settled. Final judgment was for $115,000, covering the stolen funds, damages, and every penny of my legal fees. The intellectual property for Project Labyrinth was formally and publicly reverted to me. His real losses were far greater. He became a pariah. His name was a toxic asset in the industries he so desperately wanted to conquer. 6 months later, a former colleague sent me a screenshot. It was Xavier's new professional profile. He was a freelance brand consultant, and his profile picture was a selfie taken in a cramped, generic co-working space. The expensive watch was gone. Used the settlement to start my own studio in a bright, airy office downtown. My new apartment is quiet, filled with light, and has a view of the skyline that I earned. The peace is more satisfying than any victory. Last week, I soft-launched my new project. It's wholly mine from the first line of code to the final design. An old acquaintance sent me a message. Wow, a singular vision. I smiled and typed back my reply. Some visions are meant to be shared.